Lagos had one of those evenings that could turn even the proudest man humble. Thunder rumbling like angry ancestors, the sky bruised with clouds that refused to hold back their tears. Rain came down in sheets, pelting the busy streets of Yaba, soaking pedestrians, and blurring the neon lights from roadside stalls. David Olamide stood under a half-broken shed near a Danfo park, clutching his briefcase like it was the last thing tying him to dignity. He had just walked out of a pitch that could have changed his life, or so he thought. His startup software proposal had been rejected yet again. The client's final words still stung. "You're talented, David, but talent without connection is a waste in Lagos." That sentence echoed in his skull like a curse. His face was wet, but it wasn't just rain. Disappointment had a taste, and it was bitter. He was 29, brilliant, and hard-working, yet life had a way of mocking him. For years, he had told himself that his degree, his code, and his drive would lift him out of the trenches. But Lagos didn't reward just hard work. It rewarded the cunning, the connected, and sometimes the cruel. That evening, as thunder cracked and his heart felt heavier than the sky, he saw movement beside a row of cement blocks. An old man, barefoot and trembling, sat with an empty bowl beside him. His agbada was torn, soaked to the knees, and his gray beard clung to his chin like wet wool. The man looked up at David and said weakly, "My son, please help me with small food." His voice was soft but steady, like someone used to being ignored but never losing hope. David's first instinct was disgust. "You people again," he muttered under his breath, stepping back as if poverty could stain him. "Why are you begging under this kind of rain, old man? Don't you have shame?" His words cut sharper than he intended. The old man smiled faintly, rain dripping from his eyelashes. "Shame does not feed the stomach, my son," he replied gently, "and pride does not fill the heart." David scoffed, wiping his wet brow with a tissue that was already falling apart. He was tired, hungry, angry, and the beggar was a reminder of everything he didn't want to become. "Look, old man," he said, pulling a crumpled 200 Nigerian nairas note from his pocket. "Take this and stop following people around. You people should learn to work." He tossed the note near the bowl, turned, and walked away. Behind him, thunder rumbled again, and the rain fell harder, as though the heavens mourned a moment of arrogance. What David didn't see was the old man's eyes following him, not with hatred or resentment, but with quiet knowing. "One day," the man whispered to himself, "you will understand." As David disappeared into the blur of the rain, a black SUV parked across the street, and a driver stepped out holding an umbrella. "Sir, it's time," the driver said softly. The beggar rose slowly, his gait surprisingly firm for his age. He entered the car, his soaked rags leaving faint wet marks on the leather seats. The driver handed him a towel. "Did he recognize you, sir?" The old man chuckled. "No, Tolu." He saw only what pride allowed him to see. The car pulled away, leaving behind puddles reflecting lightning, and the beginning of a story that would shake both their worlds. By the time David got home, the storm had eased, but his mind had not. The single-room apartment he shared with his mother in Surulere felt smaller that night. The flickering bulb cast yellow light over the walls covered with peeling paint and old newspaper cuttings of tech success stories. "One day, that will be me," he whispered under his breath, echoing words he had said since university days. His mother, Ifeoma, coughed softly from her bed. "David, my son, is that you?" she asked weakly. Her voice was frail, the kind that made silence seem merciful. "Yes, Mama," he replied, forcing cheer into his tone. He set down his briefcase, wiped his shoes on a rag, and went to her side. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. The sickness had been creeping for months, first mild fatigue, then long fevers, now weight loss that made her frame look like paper. "Did it go well?" she asked, eyes bright with fragile hope. He hesitated, then lied. "Yes, Mama, they said they'll get back to me." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made him feel like a thief. "God is good," she whispered. "He always provides." David nodded, swallowing hard. He knew the truth. The landlord had threatened eviction, hospital bills were piling up, and he hadn't eaten since morning. His pride, that invisible wall he built around himself, was the only thing he still owned. He had refused offers from old school friends who told him to humble himself and take smaller jobs. To David, accepting pity was worse than hunger. Yet that night, as he watched his mother sleep, he remembered the old man's words. "Pride does not fill the heart." It echoed inside him like a warning. He sat by the window, staring at the flicker of streetlights through raindrops clinging to the glass. Somewhere in that darkness, Lagos hummed with restless life, Danfos honking, street vendors shouting, generators roaring. It was a city that rewarded the loud and punished the gentle. David thought of the old man again, his calmness in the rain, his voice steady despite humiliation. Something about it wouldn't leave him. He wanted to dismiss it as nonsense, but it felt like a seed had been planted in his chest. When dawn came, he didn't know that the man he had insulted was waking up too, not on a street corner, but inside a mansion in Ikoyi, surrounded by silence, luxury, and secrets. Baba Kunal Adnaran, one of Lagos's most powerful men, had been disguising himself for years, searching for something money couldn't buy, genuine humanity. Every Friday, he would dress like a beggar and walk the streets, testing hearts. Some people gave him food, others insulted him. But there was something about David, the fire in his anger, the sadness in his pride, that caught his attention. As Kunal sat by his mahogany table, sipping tea, he smiled faintly. "That boy," he murmured. "He will either rise with humility or fall with pride." Meanwhile, David got ready for another hopeless day, unaware that destiny had marked him for a lesson only life could teach. Outside, Lagos awoke, impatient, noisy, and full of dreams. But within its chaos, two men stood on opposite ends of fortune, connected by one fateful encounter neither of them would forget. Days rolled into weeks, and with every sunrise, Ifeoma's strength faded like mist under the Lagos sun. David's heart broke a little more each time she smiled through her pain, pretending everything was fine. The doctor's last warning replayed in his head like an echo he couldn't silence. She needed a kidney transplant, and the surgery cost more than David could earn in years. He had knocked on every door, sent countless proposals, begged clients who ghosted him, and even considered selling his laptop, his only source of hope. Lagos had turned its back on him. The same people who praised his coding skills months ago now crossed the street when they saw him coming. Even Richard, his colleague and closest friend, who had once called him brother, had stopped picking his calls. Pride, that heavy armor David wore, had begun to crack. Some nights, he found himself staring at the ceiling, whispering prayers that felt hollow. He wanted to believe that God saw his struggle, that somewhere, somehow, help would come. But all he saw was his mother's fragile body on the hospital bed and bills that laughed at him from the counter. One night, as rain tapped gently against the window, David sat by his mother's side, holding her cold hands. "Mama," he said softly, "I'll fix everything. I promise." She smiled weakly and brushed his face with trembling fingers. "My son, you've done enough," she whispered. "Sometimes, God sends help through people we least expect." Her words stung, reminding him of the old beggar he had mocked. For reasons he couldn't explain, guilt flooded his chest. That night, he dreamed of the old man again, but this time he wasn't in rags. He stood tall and white, with eyes that burned like truth. "You will learn through loss what pride has stolen," the man said before disappearing into light. When David woke up, his heart raced. He didn't understand the dream, but deep inside he knew his life was about to change, painfully but purposefully. When David walked into the small office of his startup the next morning, he was met with silence, the kind that feels wrong, heavy, and suspicious. His seat was empty, his computer gone, and the files he had spent months building had vanished from the system. Panic crawled into his stomach. "Richard," he called out, voice trembling. No answer. Moments later, he received an email, short and cruel. "Effective immediately, we've decided to discontinue your partnership. Your project has been acquired by a private investor. Thank you for your contributions." The signature at the bottom stabbed him harder than any knife could. Richard Ease. His best friend, his brother in struggle, had sold their work and disappeared. David's knees buckled. He sank to the floor, gasping, his chest burning with betrayal. Every memory of shared laughter, late-night coding, and dreams of success turned to ash. He stormed out of the building and into the chaotic Lagos traffic, walking aimlessly under the scorching sun. That evening, he returned home with bloodshot eyes. Ifeoma saw his face and knew. "You've lost again," she said gently, her tone neither accusing nor surprised. He nodded, tears breaking free. "They took everything, Mama. Even my name." She reached for his hand and squeezed weakly. "Then let God give you a new one," she whispered. But David didn't believe anymore, not in God, not in hope, not in kindness. The city had taught him that survival was for the ruthless. Yet, destiny had other plans. 2 days later, as he stood by the hospital pharmacy begging for a discount, he saw a familiar figure sitting outside by the gutter. The same old beggar, smiling faintly, with the same calmness that once annoyed him. Their eyes met. David froze. The old man gestured to the empty seat beside him. Sit, he said softly. The rain fell that night, but your heart didn't. For the first time, David couldn't speak. He sat, trembling, shame washing over him like a flood. The old man looked at him kindly. Your pride has brought you here, but humility will take you farther. David's lips quivered. I don't even know how to be humble anymore. The old man smiled. Then start by saying thank you. He handed him an envelope and rose. A friend you do not know is praying for you. Before David could respond, he was gone, swallowed by the crowd. Inside the envelope was a hospital receipt. Paid in full. Every bill for his mother cleared. David's breath caught. Who are you? He whispered to the wind, but only the sound of Lagos replied. The next morning, the doctor's smile was brighter than David had ever seen. Your mother's surgery has been approved, he said. Someone paid everything anonymously. David stood frozen, tears filling his eyes. He rushed to his mother's ward, gripping her hands. Mama, you're going to be okay, he whispered. She looked up, confused but smiling. Did you get the money? He shook his head. No, someone else did. Then whoever they are, she said, God sent them. The surgery took hours that felt like days, but when it was over, the doctor emerged with a relieved face. She'll live, he said. David collapsed to his knees, weeping openly in the hospital corridor. For the first time, his tears weren't born of pride or anger, but gratitude. That night, he didn't sleep. He walked through the streets of Yaba until he found the same corner where he first met the old man. The rain had returned, drizzling softly over the city. He waited there for hours, scanning every shadow, every passerby, hoping to see him again. And when he finally did, the world seemed to pause. The old man appeared slowly from the darkness, his tattered robe fluttering in the wind. You came, he said quietly. David nodded, his voice shaking. I needed to see you. I need to understand who you are. The man smiled faintly. Who I am is not important. What you learn from this is. David fell to his knees in the mud, crying. I insulted you. I looked down on you. I thought you were beneath me. The old man placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. And yet, here we are, both kneeling before grace. His words hit deep, softening something in David's chest that had been hardened for years. The rain grew heavier, but neither of them moved. Why help me? David finally asked. Because the universe tests those it wants to raise, the man replied. I saw more in you than you saw in yourself. He turned to leave, but before he did, he whispered, when the truth comes, don't be afraid of it. And with that, he disappeared into the rain again. David stood there long after he was gone, heart burning with questions and awe. He didn't know it yet, but that night was the beginning of his redemption, the point where pride ended and destiny began. The weeks following his mother's successful surgery brought an uneasy calm to David's life. Ifeoma's health slowly began to return, her laughter gently reawakening the house that had once echoed only with despair. She could sit up now, eat small portions, even tease him when he forgot to iron his shirts. But for David, joy was mixed with confusion. He couldn't rest knowing someone had paid for his mother's surgery, a stranger who asked for nothing in return. Lagos was not kind enough to give without a motive. Every night, he returned to the same corner where he first met the old beggar, waiting and hoping to see him again. But the old man never came. It was as if he had vanished into the rain he always seemed to walk through. David's dreams became restless, filled with visions of the old man whispering riddles about pride and redemption. And each time he woke up, he felt the same weight in his chest, guilt for what he had done, and an even heavier longing to make it right. Then, just when it seemed things might improve, another blow came. David received a call from Silicon Gate, the biggest tech company in Lagos, one that had shown interest in his app months ago. They wanted to discuss potential partnership terms. His heart leapt. He ironed his only clean shirt, borrowed a tie from a neighbor, and arrived at their Victoria Island office filled with cautious optimism. The lobby sparkled with wealth, polished marble floors, scented air, and receptionists who smiled like they belonged to another world. For once, he allowed himself to dream again. But as he waited, something felt off. When he was finally called in, the man across the table wore a strange smirk. Mr. Olamide, he began, sliding a file across the desk, thank you for coming. Unfortunately, we will no longer be pursuing your software. David's chest tightened. But why? You asked me to come. Because, the man interrupted, we've already purchased a similar product. From Mr. Richard Ease. The words struck like lightning. Richard again. His betrayal had followed him here too. That can't be possible, David protested, voice cracking. That's my project. He stole it. The man leaned back. Then prove it in court. But remember, in Lagos, proof costs money. David stood there, trembling, rage boiling beneath his skin. He stormed out of the office, past the guards, into the burning afternoon sun, his world crumbling all over again. That day he realized something bitter. Talent without humility might open doors, but pride without wisdom leaves them slamming in your face. He wandered aimlessly through the streets until he found himself near the bridge again. The sky was turning gray, and the smell of rain drifted in. He sat on the curb, watching buses splash through puddles, his hands buried in his face. All around him, Lagos roared with life, yet he felt completely alone. Maybe I'm cursed, he whispered. Maybe Mama was wrong. Maybe help doesn't come for people like me. He was still speaking when he heard a faint voice behind him. Help comes when your heart is ready to receive it. He turned sharply, but there was no one there. Just the sound of thunder rolling across the lagoon. Still, something inside him shifted. He took a deep breath and walked home slowly, unaware that far away in a quiet mansion in Ikoyi, the same old beggar, Baba Naran, sat by the window watching the rain, his heart heavy but hopeful. He is close, he murmured. He's starting to see. His driver, Tolu, glanced up. Sir, you've watched this boy for months now. Why him? The old man smiled faintly. Because in his pride, I saw a mirror of my younger self. And sometimes, saving another is how we redeem our past. The following week, David received unexpected news from the hospital. His mother's post-surgery medications had been paid for 3 months in advance. Anonymous donor again, the nurse said, smiling. Your family must have angels. David stood there speechless, staring at the receipt. He didn't know what to think anymore. Gratitude wrestled with confusion, and hope tangled with suspicion. Who could care this much about a man like him? He walked home that night under the orange Lagos sunset, his mind restless. When he reached his compound, he found a small envelope tucked under his door. Inside it was a note written in neat cursive handwriting. When you are ready to learn, meet me at the bench behind Carter Bridge. Midnight. Come alone. He froze, his heart racing. It couldn't be coincidence. He waited for hours, pacing back and forth, until finally the night deepened and the city quieted. The clock struck 12. With trembling hands, he slipped out into the humid darkness. The bridge loomed above him, glowing faintly under the weak streetlights. And there he was, the old beggar, sitting on the same broken bench, dressed again in rags. His posture was straight, his eyes calm. David approached slowly, unable to speak. You came, the old man said softly. You could have ignored the letter, but you didn't. I needed to know why, David managed to whisper. Why you keep helping me. Who you really are. The man studied him for a moment, then gestured for him to sit. Tell me, my son, he began. What have you learned since that day you mocked me? David looked down, ashamed. That pride is a thief, he said quietly. It steals compassion, and then it steals peace. The old man nodded, smiling faintly. Good. Then you are ready for your test. Test? David asked. What kind of test? The man's voice turned serious. Tomorrow, someone will wrong you again. You will have every reason to fight back, every right to destroy them. But if you choose revenge, your journey ends here. If you choose grace, you begin anew. David frowned, confused. How will I even know? You will know, the old man interrupted gently. Because the pain will feel familiar. He stood, his frail form seeming stronger under the moonlight. Remember, my son, not every battle needs to be won to prove strength. Sometimes victory is in restraint. He turned to leave, but before he vanished into the shadows, he said one last thing. Your mother's life was the first gift. The next one depends on your choices. David sat there for a long time, the words swirling in his mind like smoke. The test. Revenge or grace. He didn't understand it fully, but his heart did. Somewhere between his failures, betrayals, and his mother's recovery, a new David was beginning to emerge. One who no longer measured power by pride, but by mercy. He looked toward the sleeping city, lights shimmering over the lagoon, and whispered into the wind, I'm ready. But what awaited him would challenge not just his humility. It would shake the very foundations of who he believed he was. The next morning dawned with the hum of restless Lagos life, hawkers shouting, Danfo buses honking, and generators buzzing like angry bees. David woke up early, his mind still echoing with the old man's cryptic words. Tomorrow, someone will wrong you again. You'll have every reason to fight back. He couldn't shake off the feeling that something was about to happen. After ensuring his mother had eaten, he left for an interview at a local tech hub in Ikeja, hoping to finally rebuild his life. The company, Skyframe Innovations, had seen his old projects online and was considering him for a new mobile app development contract. It felt like a chance at redemption. He dressed neatly, carrying his worn-out laptop, and prayed silently as he boarded a Kiki. When he arrived, the receptionist smiled and directed him to a small glass office. Sitting inside was none other than Richard, his former friend and betrayer. David froze. His breath caught in his chest, his fists tightening unconsciously. Richard leaned back in the chair, smug as ever. "Ah, David Olamide," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Long time, my brother." The words "my brother" made David's jaw clench. Richard gestured at the seat. "You're here for the junior developer role, right? I'm head of software now. Life changes fast, doesn't it?" David stood still, torn between fury and disbelief. "You stole my idea," he said through gritted teeth. "You took everything from me." Richard smirked. "Business is business. Lagos doesn't reward emotions. You should thank me. At least your name is still mentioned in the industry because of that project." The arrogance in his tone ignited something inside David, a rage so fierce it made his hands tremble. He wanted to lunge across the table, to break the smirk off Richard's face, to make him feel the humiliation he had endured. But then, like a whisper in his soul, he heard the old man's voice. "If you choose revenge, your journey ends here." He stood there, trembling, then slowly exhaled. "You're right, Richard," he said quietly. "Life changes fast." He turned and walked out, leaving Richard laughing behind him. That single moment, that act of restraint, felt heavier than any victory he had ever tasted. As he walked out of the building, his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Is this Mr. David Olamide?" a calm voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Mr. Tolu. I work with someone who's been observing you. You've passed your test." David stopped in his tracks. "What test?" The line went silent for a moment before Tolu continued. "There's a man who wants to meet you again. He believes it's time you saw him as he truly is. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., 27 Ikoyi Crescent." The call ended. David's heart pounded. He looked up at the busy street, the same Lagos he thought he knew, yet everything suddenly felt like part of something bigger, something divine. That night, he couldn't sleep. His mind replayed the moment he walked away from Richard. For the first time, he realized true strength wasn't in fighting, but in forgiving. Somewhere deep inside, something had shifted. A seed of humility had finally bloomed, watered by pain and guided by grace. The next morning, David woke up before dawn. He borrowed a clean shirt from his neighbor and brushed his shoes until they almost shone. The address, 27 Ikoyi Crescent, didn't make sense to him. That was one of the wealthiest areas in Lagos. He took a bus, then a short walk, and finally stopped before a massive white mansion behind golden gates. The guard checked his name on a list and opened without a word. As he walked up the marble steps, his heart raced. A tall man in a black suit opened the door. "Mr. Olamide, please come in." The air smelled of expensive cologne and polished wood. David followed the man through a hallway adorned with large paintings until they entered a room that took his breath away. A quiet study with glass walls overlooking a serene garden. And there, seated behind a wide mahogany desk, was the beggar. Except now, he wasn't in rags. He was dressed in a crisp white igbada, his beard neatly trimmed, his eyes calm but commanding. For a moment, David forgot to breathe. "Sit down, my son," the man said softly. David sat, his eyes wide with shock. You're not a beggar?" the man interrupted gently, smiling. "No, I am not. My name is Chief Colonel Adeniran, founder and CEO of Adeniran Holdings." David's mind went blank. This was one of Nigeria's most powerful men, a name whispered in business circles with both respect and awe. His company owned tech firms, real estate, and logistics chains across Africa. "You?" David stammered. "But why pretend?" Chief Colonel looked out the window thoughtfully. "Because wealth hides truth, and truth is best seen through struggle. I lost my only son to pride many years ago. Since then, I walk the streets every month disguised as a beggar, to see how people treat those they believe can give them nothing." He turned to David. "And you, my son, failed that test the first time, but you passed the second." Tears filled David's eyes as memories flooded back. The insult, the rain, the shame, the envelope. "You were the one who paid for my mother's surgery," he whispered. The old man smiled faintly. "Yes. Not because you deserved it then, but because grace doesn't wait for perfection. It plants seeds in broken soil." David bowed his head, tears falling freely. I don't know how to thank you. Chief Cunnel stood, walking to him. You already did, when you walked away from anger yesterday. They talked for hours. Chief Cunnel listened to David's story, his failures, and his dreams. By the end, he offered him something more valuable than charity, a job. Come work for me, he said. Not because you owe me, but because I believe your talent deserves purpose. David hesitated. I don't know if I'm worthy. The old man chuckled. None of us are. That's why we learn. As David left the mansion, the sun was high, glinting off the gates like a new dawn. For the first time in years, he felt light, not because life had finally favored him, but because his heart had changed. He knew humility wasn't weakness, it was strength refined by pain. And somewhere deep within him, a voice whispered, "You're just getting started." For the next few weeks, David began working at Adeniran Holdings under a small tech subsidiary called K-Tech Systems. Chief Cunnel insisted he start from the bottom, to rebuild not just his career but his spirit. The first days were hard. His colleagues often dismissed him, assuming he was just another desperate applicant. He endured every insult quietly, remembering the lessons that had brought him here. Slowly, his brilliance began to shine through. He fixed bugs that had frustrated entire teams, redesigned company systems, and even suggested features that improved client security. Word spread quickly about the quiet, humble developer who worked like his life depended on it. But as his star began to rise, so did new enemies. One afternoon, as he was leaving the office, a familiar voice called out from behind. "So, you're here too?" David turned. It was Richard again. He was standing near the parking lot, holding a folder, a smirk curling at his lips. "You never stop showing up where you're not wanted," Richard sneered. David ignored him, walking toward the gate. "Still pretending to be righteous?" Richard mocked. "I heard you're working under some old fool now. You could have joined me, but you chose to play servant. Keep it up, maybe one day they'll let you wash their cars." David stopped, turned slowly, and met his eyes. "You still think pride makes you powerful," he said quietly. "But the higher you build your ego, the harder it crashes." Richard's face darkened. "We'll see who crashes first." He stormed off. That night, trouble began. An internal audit revealed missing company data, and somehow, all evidence pointed to David. Someone had logged into the servers using his credentials. The IT head was furious. "We've lost millions in contracts because of this breach." David tried to explain, but no one listened. "You're suspended until further notice," the HR manager said coldly. "The police may be contacted." His world collapsed all over again. He walked out of the building under the heavy Lagos rain, his heart pounding with fear. The same old voices of doubt returned. "You'll never make it, you'll always be the victim, this city eats men like you." He fell to his knees by the roadside, drenched and trembling. But before despair swallowed him completely, his phone buzzed with a message. "Come to the mansion. Now." K. He stood, wiping the rain from his face, and ran through the storm like a man chasing hope itself. When he reached Chief Cunnel's home, the guards let him in immediately. Inside, the old man waited by the fireplace, calm and expectant. "I know what's happening," he said before David could speak. "They're framing you." David's voice broke. "It's Richard. He's trying to ruin me again." Chief Cunnel nodded slowly. "And this is the final test." David frowned. "Another test?" The old man's eyes gleamed. "Yes. This time, it's not about humility. It's about trust. Will you trust truth to defend you, or will you destroy yourself trying to fight back?" The thunder outside roared as if echoing the weight of those words. And in that moment, David realized this wasn't just a fight for his career, it was a battle for his soul. The night was soaked in thunder as David sat across from Chief Cunnel in the quiet of the mansion's study. Lightning flickered through the windows, carving streaks of white across the old man's face. "You've been framed before," Chief Cunnel began, voice low and steady. "And each time, your reaction has shaped your destiny." David clenched his fists, anger pulsing beneath his skin. "I can't keep letting him do this to me," he said bitterly. "Richard keeps taking everything. I forgave him once. What did it change?" The old man looked at him for a long time before speaking again. "Forgiveness isn't meant to change the betrayer, my son. It changes the betrayed." The words sank deep. "But this time," Chief Cunnel continued, "you will not fight him with words or wrath. You will fight him with wisdom. See, listen." For hours, the old man told him how power worked in Lagos, not in noise but in quiet moves. He revealed that someone inside the company had leaked confidential data to competitors, and the breach had been disguised under David's login. You've been watched by both enemies and allies, Chief Cunnel said. And sometimes the only way to expose darkness is to let it think it has won. He showed David security footage, Richard sneaking into the data room at midnight using a stolen pass. He's clever, the old man said with a tired smile, but arrogance blinds clever men faster than pride blinds the honest. David's chest tightened. So what do we do? The old man leaned back. We wait. Tomorrow he'll come to brag. And when he does, we'll be ready. That night, David slept in one of the guest rooms for the first time. Sheets clean, air-conditioned silence wrapping him like a memory of peace he'd never known. He stared at the ceiling, thinking of how far life had brought him, from the drenched street corners of Yaba to a mansion in Ikoyi, guided by a man he had once insulted. He felt both gratitude and fear, like a soul standing on the edge of transformation. Morning came softly, sunlight spilling through the curtains like forgiveness. When he came downstairs, Chief Cunnel was already seated with two men, lawyers from the company's internal board. Today, Cunnel said, truth will speak for itself. But you must let it speak through calmness, not anger. Hours later, they arrived at the corporate office. Richard was there, wearing his usual arrogance like a perfume. Oh, look who brought his sugar daddy, he sneered. Chief Cunnel smiled faintly, saying nothing. He handed a flash drive to the board members. Play this, he instructed. The room went silent as the footage appeared, Richard sneaking in, copying files, and signing under David's name. When it ended, the room stayed frozen in disbelief. Richard's face drained of color. I can explain, but the HR manager cut him off. You don't need to. Security will handle this. As guards escorted him out, he turned back, glaring at David. You think this makes you better than me? David didn't respond. He simply bowed his head. Chief Cunnel smiled, proud. You've passed, my son. You've learned restraint, and restraint is the language of kings. After Richard's dismissal, the company's board reinstated David, and Chief Cunnel promoted him to project lead for K-Teka's next innovation hub. It was the reward he had chased for years, not through flattery or shortcuts, but through growth. Yet instead of triumph, David felt quiet peace. That night, he visited his mother at home, carrying fresh fruits and medicine. Ifeoma's strength had returned. Her laughter filled the room. My son, she said, smiling, you look lighter. He nodded. Because the truth came out, Mama. The man who helped us, Chief Cunnel, he was the beggar I told you about. She froze, eyes wide. The same one you insulted that night? Yes. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Ah, my son, grace indeed has found you. He smiled faintly. I don't deserve it, Mama. But maybe that's what grace means. She reached out, holding his hand. You've learned humility the hard way. Now don't lose it. The next day, David returned to the office to thank Chief Cunnel personally. But instead of the usual sharpness in his tone, there was warmth. Sir, he began, you could have destroyed me for what I said that day. Why didn't you? The old man looked up from his desk. Because I saw myself in you, he said quietly. I was once a proud man too, a man who mocked the poor, hurt the humble, and lost my family to my own arrogance. When I met you that night in the rain, I thought maybe God had sent me a second chance, not to save you, but to redeem my own mistakes through you. The confession broke David. He knelt beside the old man and wept silently. Cunnel placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. We both needed saving, my son. You from pride, me from guilt. Days turned into weeks, and David's new life began to take shape. He worked hard but never forgot the streets that had taught him humility. He started offering mentorship sessions to young developers from low-income backgrounds, teaching them coding for free after hours. One evening, as he was packing up, a familiar voice spoke from behind him. Still saving the world, I see. He turned. It was Amara, the nurse who had cared for his mother during her illness. She smiled shyly, holding a gift bag. Your mother told me you were here. She said you're finally sleeping again. David laughed softly. Barely. Lagos never sleeps. Their laughter melted into an easy silence, one filled with recognition, not just of faces, but of shared kindness. For the first time in a long while, David felt something stir in his chest, a warmth that wasn't born of gratitude or redemption but affection. Weeks turned into months, and life blossomed in ways David never imagined. Under his leadership, K-Tech flourished, creating affordable software that helped small market traders and bus conductors keep track of daily sales and savings. Chief Cunnel watched him quietly from afar, his heart full. He's become the man his pain was meant to build, he told Tolu one morning. And he doesn't even realize it yet. But not everyone was pleased with David's rise. The board chairman of Silicon Gate, the company Richard once sold data to, began feeling threatened by K-Tech's growing dominance. "If we don't neutralize this boy, he'll own Lagos in a year," the chairman warned. So whispers began, contracts canceled suddenly, rumors spread about David's integrity, and competitors bribed to pull out of partnerships. It was a storm brewing quietly beneath success, unseen but powerful. One afternoon, as David was reviewing reports, Amara walked into his office carrying lunch. "You forgot to eat again," she said. He smiled. "You sound like my mother." "Good," she teased. "She said someone has to keep you alive." They sat and talked for hours, sharing dreams and fears. Amara told him how she had lost her father because a hospital refused treatment when he couldn't pay. "That's why I became a nurse," she said. "To be the help I once needed." Her words touched something deep in him. "You remind me of the old man," he said softly. "Chief Cunnel. He taught me that helping others isn't a choice, it's a responsibility." Amara looked at him with admiration, eyes soft. "Then you both have the same soul." Later that evening, as they left the office, Tolu approached with urgency. "Sir," he said, Chief Cunnel collapsed. "He's at the hospital." The words hit David like a punch. Without thinking, he and Amara rushed to the car. The drive was silent, heavy with dread. When they arrived, they found the old man resting weakly in a private ward, for tubes running from his frail arms. His voice was soft but calm. "Ah, my son, you came." David knelt beside him, tears already filling his eyes. "Don't talk, sir. Please rest." Cunnel smiled faintly. "No, listen. Every man must hand over his legacy before he goes. Mine isn't money or power. It's you." He took David's hand. "Promise me you'll continue what we started, not just building software but building lives." David nodded through tears. "I promise, sir." The old man closed his eyes, whispering, "Then my heart can rest." Outside, Lagos lights flickered in the distance, loud, restless, and beautiful. David stood by the window beside Amara, holding her hand as sirens echoed faintly from the streets below. He knew the storm wasn't over, but now he also knew that every storm leaves something new behind: cleaner air, stronger roots, and hearts reborn through rain. For days, Chief Cunnel remained in the hospital, frail but dignified, his voice still carrying the calm of a man who had lived fully and forgiven deeply. David visited every evening after work, bringing books, fruit, and updates about K-Tech. Amara often joined him, her gentle laughter lighting up the sterile room. She had become his anchor, her kindness effortless, her strength quiet but radiant. Even Chief Cunnel noticed. "Ah," he said one evening, smiling weakly, "this one she reminds me of my late wife. Gentle hands, brave heart." David's cheeks warmed, and Amara blushed, pretending to adjust the foreline. "She takes care of both of us, sir," David said softly. The old man chuckled. "Then make sure you never lose her." But as peace seemed to return, darkness began to whisper again. One afternoon, David was called into a meeting with the board of directors. They accused him of leaking another internal document to competitors. "It's not me," he protested. "Someone's framing me again." The chairman's voice was cold. "We'll investigate, but until then you're suspended." David's heart sank. He knew this wasn't coincidence, it was Richard's doing. Though disgraced and fired, Richard had allies who still despised David's rise. Outside the building, Amara found him sitting on the curb, his tie loosened, his eyes distant. "What happened?" she asked softly. He told her everything. "I did everything right, Amara. I worked hard, stayed humble, forgave everyone, and still this city won't let me breathe." She knelt beside him, holding his trembling hands. "The city can't destroy what God has built," she whispered. "This isn't punishment, it's another test." David's chest heaved with emotion. "I don't think I can take any more tests." She smiled faintly. "Then stop taking them. Start living them." Her words struck him like light. That night, he went to see Chief Cunnel, who was sitting up weakly. "They're after me again," David said bitterly. "I tried everything." The old man looked at him with soft, tired eyes. "My son," he said, "tests don't stop when you pass them. They stop when you no longer fear them." He took David's hand. "Let them try. Truth has a way of finding light." Later that week, as David sat in his office clearing his desk, Richard appeared once more, this time uninvited. "I told you I'd destroy you," Richard sneered. "You should have joined me. Now they'll eat you alive." David looked at him calmly. "You've already destroyed yourself," he said quietly. "I'm just watching you realize it." For a moment, Richard's smile faltered. Still pretending to be the saint? No, David replied. Just a man who finally knows peace. Richard's smirk returned, but it was shaky. We'll see how peaceful you are when they fire you. He turned and left, but something about David's silence unsettled him. That night, David didn't cry, didn't rage. He simply went home, knelt beside his bed, and prayed, a real prayer this time, not the desperate ones of before, but one of surrender. He asked for nothing. He only said, "Thank you." It was in that surrender that his heart finally rested. What he didn't know was that his calm would soon become his greatest weapon. The next morning, chaos erupted at K-Tech. The company servers crashed, and every file linked to the alleged leak vanished. The IT team traced the breach to a remote device, and the IP address belonged not to David, but to a board member who had been secretly collaborating with Richard's network. Within hours, the truth surfaced like sunlight breaking through cloud. The chairman, who had accused David, was forced to resign. Emails and financial records exposed a ring of executives trading company data to foreign firms. Chief Cunnell's lawyers presented everything to the board, clearing David's name publicly. By afternoon, messages flooded his phone, apologies, reinstatement letters, even praise. But David didn't celebrate. He only felt relief. That evening, he visited Chief Cunnell to share the news. "You were right," he said. "Truth found light." The old man smiled faintly. "You see? Sometimes the battle doesn't need your sword, just your stillness." Tears filled David's eyes. "You've taught me more than any school could." The old man squeezed his hand weakly. "Then my job is done." His voice softened. "Now love, build." Days later, Chief Cunnell passed away peacefully in his sleep. His funeral was small, private, just as he wanted. No cameras, no politicians, no lavish displays. Only David, Amara, Tolu, and a handful of loyal staff stood beneath the gray sky as his body was laid to rest. David wept silently, not just for the man he had lost, but for the father he had gained and the version of himself that had died with him. Amara stood beside him, her hand in his. "He's not gone," she whispered. "He's in everything you do now." Her words gave him strength. Weeks later, David was named the new CEO of K-Tech Systems, fulfilling Chief Cunnell's final wish. He didn't throw a party or make grand speeches. Instead, his first order as CEO was simple. K-Tech would open free training programs for unemployed youths, helping them learn coding and digital skills. "We'll call it the Cunnell Project," he said quietly. His employees cheered. That night, he and Amara sat by the company rooftop, watching Lagos glitter below like a city that never slept but somehow healed its own wounds through noise. "You kept your promise," she said. "He'd be proud." David smiled. "He taught me that power means nothing if it doesn't lift others." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for a long time, they watched the skyline together, both lost in thought. Then, out of nowhere, David said, "Amara, I don't know what the future holds, but I want to walk through it with you." She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering. "That's your proposal?" she teased. "No," he said softly, standing up. "This is." He knelt down right there under the Lagos stars, pulling out a small silver ring. "You saved me in ways I can't explain. Will you be my wife?" Her laughter broke into tears as she nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, David. 1,000 times yes." And as the wind blew through the night, carrying distant sounds of Danfo horns and street prayers, it felt like the city itself was celebrating a love that had been forged through storms, tested by betrayal and crowned by grace. Months later, Lagos awoke to a different kind of story. Under David's leadership, K-Tech became known not just for innovation, but for compassion. They launched apps that helped petty traders save daily income, students access free learning materials, and hospitals manage patient records at no cost. Newspapers called it the company that gave back. David didn't chase profit, he chased purpose. His mother often came to visit their new home in Lekki, teasing him endlessly. "My son, from Yaba gutter to Lekki gates," she would say, laughing. "If only your father could see you now." He would smile, remembering Chief Cunnell's words. "Humility builds houses no money can buy." Amara became more than his wife, she was his compass. She ran community health outreaches funded by K-Tech, caring for pregnant women and children in poor neighborhoods. "You're the heart," David often told her. "I'm just the hands." Together, they built a quiet empire, not of wealth, but of impact. One evening, as they drove through the old streets of Yaba, David asked the driver to stop near the bridge. He stepped out, walked to the exact spot where he had first met the old beggar years ago. The rain had started again, soft, rhythmic, almost nostalgic. He knelt down, touched the wet ground, and whispered, "Thank you." A faint breeze stirred the air, almost like a reply. Amara joined him, slipping her hand into his. "He'd be proud," she said. "He already is," David replied, looking up at the cloudy sky. In that moment, everything came full circle. The rain that once marked his arrogance now felt like blessing. The bridge that witnessed his fall now stood as the monument of his redemption. As they walked back to the car, laughter echoed from street vendors, danfos honked, and life pulsed through Lagos with the same energy as always. But this time, David didn't see chaos. He saw grace in motion. And in that moment, he understood the folktale truth behind his journey, that in a city of noise, pride, and ambition, the greatest wealth was kindness, the rarest success was humility, and sometimes, the richest man on the street was the one dressed in rags, sent to remind the proud that heaven's greatest gifts often wear human disguise. The sun over Lagos that morning painted the skyline gold, bathing the city in a warmth that felt like grace reborn. David stood before a mirror in his modest yet elegant home in Lekki, adjusting the collar of his white kaftan. Today wasn't about business or success, it was about gratitude, legacy, and love. Behind him, Ifeoma watched proudly, her eyes glistening. "You look just like your father on our wedding day," she said softly. David smiled and turned. "Mama, today isn't my wedding," he teased. "It's a surprise for Amara." Ifeoma chuckled, her laughter filling the room like music. "Then may your surprise bring joy that no storm can wash away." Later that evening, David drove Amara to the beach house Chief Cunnel had once taken him to, a quiet place on the Lekki shoreline where the waves met the sand with gentle authority. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and memory. Lanterns flickered in the dusk, and candles formed a soft path that led to a small wooden table beneath a palm tree. Amara gasped. "David, what is this?" she asked, her voice trembling with wonder. "Just dinner," he replied with a grin, though his heart pounded like a drum. They sat, shared laughter, stories, and silence that said more than words ever could. Then, as the night deepened and the ocean whispered, David stood and walked toward her. "Amara," he began, voice unsteady, "when my world fell apart, you stood beside me. When I lost faith, you prayed for me. And when I forgot who I was, you reminded me that I was more than my pain." He knelt, pulling out a simple gold ring. "I don't have fancy words. I just know I want every day of my life to begin and end with you. Will you marry me?" Amara covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. For a moment she couldn't speak, then she whispered, "Yes, yes, David." He slid the ring onto her finger as the waves kissed the shore, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, not in anger this time, but like applause from heaven. They embraced, the wind dancing around them, carrying laughter and tears into the night. Later, as they sat watching the stars, David looked at the horizon and whispered, "Thank you, Chief Cunnel. You kept your promise." Amara leaned her head on his shoulder. "And now it's your turn to keep yours," she said softly. "To build, to teach, to love." He nodded, gazing at the dark ocean that had once mirrored his despair but now reflected hope. "I will," he said. "For him, for us, and for every boy who thinks kindness makes him weak." In that sacred silence, two hearts sealed a vow that would ripple across generations. Weeks turned into months, and wedding preparations quietly began. It wasn't a grand affair, no celebrities, no glittering halls. Just family, close friends, and a few of Chief Cunnel's loyal staff who had become like kin. David wanted simplicity, something pure and honest. "No big shows," he told Amara. "I want the day to feel like peace." And that was exactly what it became. The ceremony was held in his mother's backyard in Suralere, where mango trees shaded the guests and soft music filled the afternoon air. Ifeoma wore a radiant smile, her face glowing with the pride of a mother who had seen both sorrow and sunrise. When she placed her hands on David and Amara's heads to bless them, her voice trembled with emotion. "You too have walked through fire," she said, "but the fire did not burn you, it purified you. May your home be a river that never runs dry." David could barely hold back tears as he looked at the woman who had raised him with prayers instead of wealth. He took her hand and kissed it gently. "Everything I am," he said, "is because you never gave up on me." The guests cheered softly, wiping their eyes. The exchange of vows was intimate and tender. When the officiating pastor asked if they took each other in love and faith, their "I do" echoed with years of pain turned into promise. As they sealed it with a kiss, laughter broke out, and the crowd clapped joyfully. Ifeoma began to dance, her steps slow but full of spirit, and soon everyone joined her, neighbors, friends, even the driver Tolu. Later that evening, after the guests left and the compound quieted, Amara and David sat together under the old mango tree, surrounded by faint candlelight. "You know," Amara said, smiling, "this is exactly what I dreamed of, not noise, not luxury, just love and peace." David looked at her with admiration. "You've taught me what wealth really is," he said. "It's not in what we own, but in who we share it with." They sat in silence for a long time, watching the moon hang low over the city. Somewhere far away, the muezzin's call to prayer echoed softly, blending with the hum of distant generators and night crickets. Lagos was alive, imperfect, loud, yet somehow holy in that moment. And under its vast sky, David whispered a final prayer, not for success, but for grace to remain humble, for courage to keep giving, and for love to never lose its wonder. It was a crisp Sunday morning when David and Amara's wedding day finally arrived. The air buzzed with excitement and the fragrance of fresh flowers. Neighbors peeked from their windows, smiling at the sight of the simple convoy that carried the bride and groom to the small church near Ojalegba. The choir's voices rose like angels as the couple walked down the aisle, Amara radiant in her lace gown, David graceful in his cream agbada. The officiating pastor, an old family friend, smiled warmly. "When two hearts have been tested by time, trials, and truth," he said, "their union becomes unbreakable." The congregation murmured in agreement. Ifeoma sat in the front row, clutching her handkerchief, tears streaming freely. "My son," she whispered under her breath, "you made it." The vows were simple yet powerful. David looked into Amara's eyes and said, "You were my miracle in a storm I didn't deserve to survive. I promise to love you with the same patience you showed me when I was lost." Amara, trembling, replied, "You showed me that kindness is strength and forgiveness is freedom. I promise to walk beside you in faith, not fear." The church fell silent, moved by their sincerity. When they exchanged rings, the light through the stained glass windows fell perfectly upon them, painting their faces in color, a divine sign, some whispered. As they walked out, the crowd erupted in applause, ululations, and joyful music. Outside, the street kids David once taught coding classes lined the walkway, clapping and chanting, "Oga David! Oga David!" He laughed, tossing small envelopes to them filled with money and chocolate bars. Their reception was held in the same backyard where Chief Cunnel once visited them for lunch. No luxury tents, no cameras, just music, laughter, and dancing under the open sky. At one point, David stopped and looked up, imagining Chief Cunnel smiling somewhere beyond the clouds. "You kept your word," he whispered. Amara joined him, holding his hand. "And now it's our turn," she said. "Let's build the future he dreamed of." Together, they danced under the soft lights, their steps in rhythm with a city that once broke them but now celebrated their love. Years passed, and the story of the beggar billionaire and the proud engineer became a quiet legend whispered in Lagos tech circles and told by street vendors who had seen too much of life to doubt miracles. David and Amara built not just a family but a legacy. Their company, K-Tech, grew into a movement, teaching underprivileged youths, empowering small businesses, and bridging the gap between technology and humanity. Every year, on Chief Cunnel's birthday, they closed the office and went to Yaba Bridge, feeding beggars and homeless families in remembrance of the day humility began. David would kneel by the old corner, press his palm to the wet pavement, and whisper, "Thank you, sir. I still remember." Ifeoma lived to see her grandchildren, 2 boys and a girl, all bright-eyed and full of laughter. She often sat them on her lap, telling them, "Your father was once so proud, he shouted at an angel in disguise." They would laugh, but David would smile quietly, knowing every word carried truth. When people asked how he became so successful, he never mentioned degrees or profits. He always said, "A beggar taught me everything." On the 10th anniversary of Chief Cunnel's passing, David unveiled a new project, a free coding institute named the Adneron Academy of Grace. Its motto read, "Humility builds, kindness sustains." The opening ceremony drew people from all walks of life, students, vendors, tech leaders, and even former street beggars now working as staff. As he cut the ribbon, he looked at the sky, and for a fleeting moment, he swore he saw the old man in white, smiling under the golden light. "You did well, my son," the wind seemed to say. That evening, as the sun dipped beyond the horizon, David and Amara stood hand in hand, watching the city lights come alive. The world around them had changed, but one truth remained timeless. The richest man is not the one who has the most, but the one who gives the most with humility. And so ended their tale, a Lagos folktale reborn for a new generation, reminding all who heard it that destiny often wears rags, grace often speaks softly, and redemption always begins with kindness. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and put on post notifications.